Hello, everyone. Welcome to Mutual Knowledge. And tonight I have the pleasure to be with Antoine Toulme, who is a senior engineering manager at Splunk and who has done many other things. Antoine, hello.
Hey, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Thanks for being here tonight. So, Antoine, can you introduce yourself to start the interview?
Yeah, thank you for having me. We appreciate. So I'm the engineering manager of the blockchain team at Splunk. I've been at Splunk for 2 years. I work on blockchain, work on Ethereum. I've been working with Fabric, Corda, a few others as well. And I also have the position of the client interoperability chair for the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance. I'm a committer for Hyperledger Besu. I'm a member of the Apache Software Foundation, among other things. So, yeah.
Also, the Apache Software Foundation. That's great. Have you been always into the open source philosophy even before blockchain was mainstream?
Yeah. So that's a good question. I started working around 2006, and my first job was working with the Eclipse Foundation on a business process modeling tool that was open sourced with Eclipse. So let's say from 2006 already, I was doing a bunch of open source work. I was actually a member of the Architecture Council. I famously opened the issue with the Eclipse Foundation to move everybody to Git, which turned to be a long thread of emails. So yeah, I've been doing open source throughout, and I'm very active in terms of open source. That I think is the best way to contribute.
All right. And what was your first experience with the blockchain industry? Was it already as a technician, as an engineer, or as a user?
That's a great question. You have great questions. I um, I was working in Silicon Valley. I've been in Silicon Valley since 2008, right? So I got a bunch of different jobs. Um, and My last job, I was managing an IoT cloud deployment at Acer. And I just got a cold email once from a guy called Daniel Heeman
Hmm.
from Consensus, who was looking to hire Java engineers to work on an Ethereum client. So the first contact I had with crypto was not by buying Bitcoin or getting into the game through my own beliefs. It was, hey, this is an actual interesting technical challenge where I can actually contribute open source to a new domain that's going to be far like and beyond what I could do in Silicon Valley.
Wonderful. That's funny. I like those kinds of profiles, because
Mhm.
we often have people who came in contact with the blockchain industry because they found it interesting as users, but so many people thought, hey, this is actually a daunting task to make it work. Um,
Mhm.
and what did you think about it? What was the most appealing aspect for you? Was it the philosophical aspect or really the technical challenge?
Yeah, so I had no idea what I was getting myself into. It was 2017, so it was this before things got a lot more mainstream as well. Um, but I was coming out of the IoT wave, and IoT kind of failed to catch the mainstream. I was looking to maybe get a new job and move to a new domain, and I realized something is sitting in Silicon Valley, all the jobs would eventually lead you to work at Facebook, Google, Twitter,
Mm.
Apple, right? And the options were either those four or the company that was going to be acquired by them, right? And I felt like I was actually trapped a little bit. I wanted to go and build a network that was going to be way outside those boundaries. It's also very constraining to work in Silicon Valley on those things because it was very it's just boring at the end of the day, right? So you're just running servers now. And so I was looking at two options. I could go work at Google and be a manager, and the option that was in front of me was even to run operations for a small team, right? To just run SREs, and they kind of failed to make it really appealing to me. They're like, oh, you can manage people, and this is what your day to day is going to be. And then next to it is like, okay, here's something completely unknown. You go and play with new tech. We have no idea what we're getting ourselves into. It's extremely challenging. We have to build the whole team. We have to build the whole org. And it was just this time of my life where I felt like take on some more risk. And I had the support of my family to go play with this new technology, so I went ahead. I found out it was extremely immature, as you can imagine. So it was 5 years ago, right? Time flies.
Some people still
And
say it's immature now.
it's still immature. I mean, yes, you can quote me on that. Back then, it was just difficult to even get a good grasp of the whole technology aspect of it without going like really deep inside the code bases of the existing clients or deciphering the yellow paper from Gavin Wood. That was specifically for fame, right? And so you have to remind yourself, like, I was going into this no knowledge of crypto whatsoever beforehand, right? I knew how to do signatures or basic RSA crypto, but not much more than that. So, I was flabbergasted by that. I also felt like the maturity of the engineers working on this was very junior, because at the time, Consensus was working a little bit like a Y Combinator kind of approach, where they're trying to attract people to come and play on Ethereum. Famously, what Joe Lubin said to people is like, the PlayStation's coming out, there's no games on it, right? So it's a very different type of people from, let's say, a Google, where Google is like, hey, we're going to get you the best nerds and going to work on some really hardcore technology deep down in the balls of the file system to make it 10% better, right? Mm-hmm. That's not it. That was more we have a bunch of JavaScript folks who are trying to build business cases on top of the blockchain. How do we make it so that in 6 months from now, we have something to show for? It's a very different challenge.
Wonderful. It's very interesting because I see so many people coming from these big, heavy hitters from the Silicon Valley saying, I didn't want to be a code monkey, but I didn't know what I was getting into. And this is usually a very touching story because it's intellectually more stimulating.
That's right. Yeah. At the end of the day, it turned out to be a human problem too. So, managing people in this type of new economy is difficult, and really need to build trust, you need to build values. So I learned a lot about even just management and recruiting through that. I've done some of it before, but it was, in person. Now it was all remote, across different geographies, different cultures, different ways of thinking. And it was challenging for that reason. So I did a whole tour of that ecosystem. I did about 18 months at Consensus to kind of understand what I was getting myself into and see a little bit. There are two aspects, right? There's the Ethereum kind of freewheeling public blockchain, don't want to know masters, crypto anarchist back then was still a thing. And there was the enterprise version of Ethereum, which we were building to. So we were building to two different audiences, which had very different goals, very different perspectives on what they were trying to do. Both of them, they want uptime, but the enterprise folks, they also want like better security. They want to be able to track back the chain. They want to have better privacy of the data. So there was a lot more infrastructure to build around that. And I started working with the Quorum team a little bit to understand better what they were doing. We built a private enclave to store data aside from the public chain into a private repository on its own. So we did a whole tour on this. In Java was not the best language, out of the box to build blockchain. So it was just a lot of fun to also build other primitives.
Yeah, just it
So
reminds me of those guys who are building video games with Microsoft Excel and who still manage to do that.
Yeah, it was. It's still to this day, right? There are still times where with Hyperledger base, there are moments where it's slow, but because it's Java and you have the ability to kind of reframe and recreate stuff, like the engineers who worked on it actually build more innovation to kind of address that instead of using brute force. So, for example, the bonsai trees that came into Besu allow you to do a lot better job at storing data, so without having too much terabytes of data to think about. So it's really interesting. Lots of iteration on that tech.
For our
Yeah.
listeners, we have in French we have a term which is called l'époque héroïque, which means those heroic times where you basically don't know exactly what you're getting yourself into, what you're doing, but everything is so exciting because everything is new and you're just tinkering with
Right.
everything. And we're still in this in the blockchain sector. I have one question, especially for you, Antoine, because I contacted you. We reached out to you through LinkedIn, and I saw that you're not only interested in code, but also you like you're writing on your LinkedIn profile that you like jumping in for Q&As with customers to really understand their experience, to have something that is more
Yeah.
related to human problems, not only a technical approach. And this is not super common, and I really like that kind of transdisciplinary approach. Would you say that the decentralized aspect, the decentralized culture of the blockchain industry has changed the way you manage people as a manager?
Oh, yes. Yeah. I mean, both ways, right? So for people management with remote and decentralized first, you have to be a lot more about a framework. So as a people manager at Splunk, right, we have built a number of I would characterize that it's not actually for me, right? There's a lot of great people who've been building stuff around leadership and management. I'm on a Slack called the Rand Slack from Range and Repose, the guy who was the VP of engineering of Slack. His name is Michael Lopp, actually. His human name, that's his book, Managing Humans.
Humans, okay.
So that's 17,000 people on that Slack who talk about leadership all the time. So I'm just been infusing and reading this every day for the last 6 years. So I learned a lot from that. What you find out is that you can't really make people do things, right? We're in a post, it's no longer that. It's no longer a factory job. You can tell them, hey, show up at 8 and do the 5 things I'm asking you to. Now we have to have people use their brains for a lot better. So instead, you build defensive mechanisms so that you never have to go down the path of talking to people like they're 5, right? So you build stuff like you build values, you build a bunch of codes, build a bunch of workflows and processes to work with them. I have a matrix with all the responsibilities in the team. We agreed on what maturity looks like when you want to release code. We build all those things like straight up before we go talk about what we're gonna do today, right? And that gives us a frame of reference where we can work together on building software that actually is going to work. In my current team, I'm also blessed that we're talking a lot to customers. So that's maybe a different topic, but yeah, we also keep up with an actual set of real humans. We're not just slinging around software and throwing it over the fence. We have real discussions with prospects.
Wonderful. And can you tell us a bit more about your work at Splunk? What
Yeah, sure.
technical problems are you working on, for example?
Yeah, I've been at Splunk for over 2 years, right? So I joined as a manager of the existing team. It's been actually started by Nick McCurvey in 2017. And initially, it was an exploration from even the exec level, right? Hey, what's this thing with blockchain? Let's figure it out. Let's actually go deep inside and see what makes sense here for Splunk. Splunk is not super well known, so just to backtrack and zoom out a little bit, Splunk is a thing that was started in 2004, right? So it's really ancient now in those terms of internet history. And it was kind of built as a Google for logs, right? So you have a bunch of boxes in your data center, they're spitting out logs constantly. How do you know without gripping a bunch of stuff that you are actually working with the right logs, right? So it started like this, very nimble, ability to grab the logs, make sense of them, indexing them quickly. Then you start clustering that. Then you start having like a dedicated box in your environment for this. And before you know it, you ingest quite a bit of data into Splunk to at scale, run with your big data center deployment and even your cloud deployments now. So Splunk is all about data, making sense of data, creating visualizations and insights around the data so you can actually make sense of what's going on, right? And it's a very interesting take on computer science, on the problems we have. Lots of time, we're just sling around code and we're just straight in prod. Then 3 months later you're back and you're like, yeah, what's going on? You scrap a little bit the logs and you find out like, okay, you've been doing this fatal mistake for 3 months and your stuff is just red all over, right? Take that 10,000 times, right? You're in a production environment, you're a big customer. Splunk is really helpful for this type of use cases. And you can automate alerts, you can create all sorts of remediation scenarios, things like that. So we're talking about this big box software, right? And now when you apply it to blockchain, there's really two things you can do. You can use it to actually understand what's going on with your infrastructure, which is really interesting because you're running this custom-made software for blockchain, such as, let's say, Go Ethereum or Aragon, which are going to expose metrics that you might want to look at, make sure you're getting tiers, make sure you're up to date on the chain, and also ingest all the logs, because if there are any errors, you want to be able to react quickly to them. So we start building that first, right? We build all the infrastructure. We actually work primarily first with enterprise blockchains, such as Fabric. We even played with Corda. And we found out that it's really limited to some specific use cases where in consortium mode, you have 4 or 5 players tops. So about a year ago, we started being a bit more focused around Ethereum and the public chains in particular, because they were catching on and really having interesting use cases. And that brought us to a second thing that we're doing really well now, which is we have the ability to ingest everything that happens on a blockchain. So think about all the blocks, all the transactions, all the events from those transactions, all the receipts from the execution of those transactions. We ingest all this data, we decode it because it's encoded into hex bytes. It's really hard to read by default. And now we can see OpenSea, right? All the transactions in OpenSea, we can actually characterize that. We can create graphical representations of that. We can see in real time, all the NFT exchanges. We can see if someone is paying less than issued. We can watch a particular wallet. We can see all the activity of that wallet. We can look at the total supply of USDC in real time. We can look at Chainlink Oracle data. All this, it becomes available to you out of the box, and we're making that available already indexed for customers so they can actually make sense of what's going on in Ethereum, plug in their contract address, and start splunking that data right away to build visualizations such as the interest rate on a particular account, for example.
Wonderful.
Those kind of stuff.
And I have a question, because I suppose you guys are handling ludicrously huge amounts of data. Do you think there's such a thing as too much data, not in terms of computation power or in terms of storage possibilities, but in terms of analysis? Because sometimes when you have too much data, for example, in medical science, sometimes it can be confounding, and because we have so much data, it can lead us to confusing interpretations. Could there be something in the blockchain world where there's such a thing as too much data to analyze?
Yeah, I think we're there, especially for stuff like Ethereum. I mean, so to give you an idea of what's going on, right? When we run an archive node for Geth, it takes so an archive node. I probably need to get the semantics out first. So if you start today a Geth node, by default, it's going to use a fast sync, which means that it's going to only keep the latest execution state of the latest blocks, right? So it knows about the value for that account in the last, I think 256 blocks, I might be wrong. So, if you ask for, hey, I wanted to know what my balance was 1 million blocks ago, it's going to start telling you, hey, I don't have this info, right? I don't have it computed anymore. It's not on disk. So that's great, because this way they can reduce greatly how much data they're storing. If you try to store every piece of data, every piece of every value of a time, you actually have 10 terabytes of data with Geth, right? Aragon does a little better, but still it's quite confounding. And then when we ingest that, we go and scrape 10 terabytes of data. Now, we are not just doing that for mainnet, we're doing that for all the test nets, and we're doing that for Bitcoin. And Bitcoin's actually pretty mean compared to what you can do with Ethereum.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah, because there's just a lot less going on. There's, first off, the block time is longer, and UTXO data is very lean, so there's no state. There's no, because you can interpret the data from Ethereum in 5 ways, right? When I see a transaction, for example, I would store it as an event. I would store its ERC balances before and after. I would store its information about the wallets before and after. I would store maybe the transaction itself, decode it, store it as well, the block. I mean, you can actually overkill yourself, like bringing all this stuff into the system.
Of course.
So I think we're there. I think it's difficult. There's an announcement that was made recently by the lead of GEF that going forward they would not keep the whole history into GEF because it's just too much, and I get why. But it's just not very practical going forward. So the whole reason this happens is because of the way Ethereum is built is around the notion of an account, where you have every wallet has its own balance, its own nonce, its own tree where you can store stuff, right? And you just keep the root of that tree in the ledger itself, but the tree itself is kept around if you want to keep the archive node. And that starts to weigh quite a bit. It's difficult to parallelize. It's difficult to keep around. So it's a pretty heavy structure by itself. And for that reason, we do see a lot of data. You could say, pretty much every L2, Arbitrum, all those players are going to start seeing that as well, just because right now their state is cheap, so people are abusing that. Oh. And what happens is that at some point you reach out some level of threshold and you start having too much state, and now you're back to the same problem you had before.
This is fascinating. At Moon, we have worked with Cardano to build a technology we call AVOOM, which means account view on UTXO models. So basically, we're putting the UTXO models on par with the account style capabilities of Ethereum by doing many adjustments and tweakings. We've done that for Nervos and started doing this for Cardano, and we also thought, hey, maybe one day we will need to do the same thing the other way around, basically bringing UTXO capabilities and data treatment to account style blockchains. So
that makes sense actually. Yeah,
what you're saying confirms this. Yeah, and
definitely. Yeah.
Do you think this is something that ultimately will happen over and over? Like, even if we optimize the code more, even if we get better at this, do you think the industry will have to let go, the full history, the idea of a complete absolute history of everything that happened on the blockchain? Is it like something that is going to change forever when there are too many users?
I think there's two answers here. One is there is a evolution of the state representation. So there's a French guy you should interview as well. His name is Guillaume Ballet. He's working on the GEF team. He's been working on a new approach to storing the data. So if you look at the state in Ethereum, it's got a root hash, right, which is computed from a tree, which is using 16 nodes every time. So you keep going like 16 on 16. They found that maybe there's a better way, which is you use 256 nodes instead of 16. And they call that Verkle trees, because I'm wondering, I think V must be standing for Vitalik, I guess. I don't know. But with Merkle, yeah, so, whatever, right? So they have those much wider trees, which means they're less deep, which means there's less recomputation needed for every time you update, right? And seems to be doing a lot better in terms of scalability in terms of state. The interesting part of that is that he's able to also compute a proof that he's updating a portion of the tree, and now you can actually do like config checks when you update your tree. So you can actually do a lot better and a lot faster when you look at what you can update your tree with, and eventually that might help with some parallelization of the state. So there's some hope there, not to oversell it, but it feels like it's great. The problem is, of course, Ethereum is not currently using that model. So what's really the really difficult discussion to be had is how do you move from that to this new model? And it seems like they were talking to me last time, like 2 years work of like road mapping plus diffing plus keeping the existing, but at the same time bringing the new one, and it's just it's a lot of work.
That's a daunting task indeed. And is this topic the hottest one for Ethereum in your opinion, or are there other things that you deem absolutely inevitable if Ethereum is to scale to a higher level to survive in the future?
Right. So that's the kind of the second answer I have for you on the scaling. Cool. Is that so? They're gonna move to POS. They're going to move to that proof of stake algorithm that doesn't change anything around scalability, none whatsoever. Right. Mm-hmm. We're going to see maybe a little bit of a faster block time, but that doesn't change much in terms of actual real life use cases. There is going to be maybe some changes around the way transactions are being submitted to the chain. There may be validators will do like bundles of transactions to avoid bad actors sandwiching transactions or doing all sorts of mad things. It still doesn't change your scalability. What I would love to be able to see personally is a model that does not rely as much on the ledger approach, where right now all your tokens, right? When you say you have a token associated with you, it's just that there's a contract out there that says there's a map where it says Gauthier has this many tokens. Mm-hmm. And the contract itself holds those tokens, not you, right? So it's actually centralized into an account.
Custodial, right? Yeah.
And so if you want to upgrade or change the values in that contract, what you're constantly doing is you're hitting that address all the time. It raises the gas prices. If you do NFT means, for example, you have those issues. I'd love to be able to see a decentralized token approach that would be just signature, for example, and then you store it under your account. So it's your stuff. Yeah.
So and the blockchain would just keep the contract and the signature, but not the custody of the funds, basically.
Yeah.
Okay.
That would be a fun approach to it. But that's just me dreaming. Okay. So
no, but it's interesting.
Don't report on it. Yeah.
So basically, what you're saying is that all the little sane game theory optimizations are cool for game theory and safety for the users, but are not going to do so much in terms of transaction prices and transaction speed. Okay.
No, I mean, there will still the same congestion. There's a bit of a change in the way where the blocks might get gossiped in maybe different ways. Less on calls. Of course, there's no more on calls because it's POS, so it's a different place together. I don't really believe in sharding in the way that is currently being proposed. I think it's not done. And by the way, I'm talking a lot about Ethereum, but there's a ton of other activities out there, right? So we should not discount that. And so I believe more in personally. I got a few contacts with Polygon way back when, before Polygon even existed. Right, was talking to me high-low. I think this guy is brilliant. I think they're probably building the right approach. I noticed from Polygon, from Scale Labs as well, that they're starting to think about app chains. So you are the biggest move that was public about that is DYDX, which moved away from Starkware. And the reason they moved away from Starkware is to build their own chain. Okay. Because they have specific trade-off that they want to make around the ways they execute the transactions, especially around their order book. But I could see that happening for pretty much every other enterprise. Why would you play along with the rules of a chain you do not control or support, such as Ethereum, when you would want to build your own logic and you would want to be able to completely bake it into it? So the trust mechanisms are different, right? So all of a sudden you're completely in control maybe of how it could be shaped. So it's really difficult in a way. It's really, the trust proposition is different. But you can also shape it to really make it work for your own use case. And for better or worse, I think the world is going to go to a place where everything is a blockchain, but everything is its own blockchain, right? Starbucks is going to have its own blockchain. When it was 2017, I was hearing things like, oh, Starbucks is going to have its own token. Well, I think now Starbucks is going to have its own blockchain, right? Because we still need the blockchain for the trust element, because I think we lost a lot of trust over the last 5 years. You can't just trust that the relational database of Starbucks is going to hold your tokens correctly. But you might want to you might be more amenable to having a crypto wallet with the Starbucks chain, knowing very well that the assets on the Starbucks chain are also kind of managed by them, but in a more transparent way, right? So it's all about, to me, it's all about that. So I think there's maybe a lot of innovation to be happening on top of Cosmos, because it's been easier to build their own blockchain there. That's what I'm seeing. Not that I'm very familiar with it. So I'm guessing this is the biggest competition to Ethereum, and this view right now where Ethereum is trying to be the settlement layer for the financial world is having everybody just kind of go their own way and build their own chain out of frustration.
Wonderful. And earlier in our conversation, you talked about sharding. You said you were not a big fan of the process. Is it for any type of blockchain, or just for those that, such as Harmony One, that added some sharding to, basically who derived from Ethereum and added sharding, or even those such as, I think Tezos uses sharding, but in a very different way. Is it all types of sharding that you're skeptical about?
Okay, so it's a complex discussion. So I worked briefly. I would say I'd like to say I worked. I collaborated / was a spectator of ETH2 back in 2018 when sharding was already hot.
Okay.
And if you remember back then, they're like, "Oh, we're done. We're doing sharding." Then they cut, "Oh no, let's think this through. We're gonna do phase 0, phase 1, phase 2." And now we're basically seeing the end of maybe phase 0, but even simplified, right? We are like the ETH2 roadmap, the agenda is huge, right? So first off, you can already see like there's a difference between what you like to be able to do and reality is catching up to you pretty quick. When sharding was discussed back then, I think there were some very criticisms about even the word sharding being used. Sharding is used in database land to say you're going to cut some of the data based on the primary key, right? So for example, if you're using Cassandra or things like that, you're going to make sure you route the data to different servers because that's how you get better scalability, right? So, you take the alphabet, divide into everything from A to whatever goes to this type of servers and everything else goes there. In blockchain, you can't make that type of judgment calls. So, okay, so now you divided the flow of transactions into 2 different servers, right? But those two still want to talk to each other. So those shards still want to talk. So you did not solve the problem, right? And so they started also doing things like, oh, we're going to make the sharding interesting by having different shards have different properties. That was way back when. I'm like, okay, why? What's going on, right? All of this sharding is only for video games. Okay, but what if I want to take my video games and take them to this other shard that has nothing to do with it? Oh, they're useless there? Okay, interesting. So and this is where I go back to the app chain model, right? So in that case, why isn't Ubisoft doing its own blockchain? Why would they play along? So, and then they kind of skimmed it down to the roll-up saying, okay, let's sharding complex, let's not go there quite yet. How about this? We can use the settlement layer to say everybody's going to agree at intervals to store the root of the current roll-ups into our existing settlement. And I think at the end of the day, this is what is replacing sharding, right? This is what the practical solution is replacing sharding. It's like, well, we're going to have to just compromise on the fact that everybody's going to come together and kind of merge mine into the settlement layer and agree that this is the order in which things happened. So it's a little bit of a capitulation to me. That said, they're trying to rethink that. There's dank sharding has been happening to kind of rethink how they want to go about it. I think it's actually taken away from another blockchain's approach. So we'll see how it plays out. And I think there's still a lot of better innovation than just sharding, such as the data availability layers, the composite blockchain approach that we're seeing from Celestia and others, which seems to be more practical, I guess. Yeah, okay. I would say that. So yeah, that's what's happening to me.
Okay, and so what are your thoughts about the industry at the moment? Do you think what would be the next steps for you to make it more mature, to basically make it healthier. I'm not strictly speaking about the cryptocurrency industry, but the whole blockchain industry. So all the applications outside of the crypto tokens.
Yeah, good question. There's a lot of work. I still feel it's very immature. So I'll tell you what I'm doing from my little corner. Right,
Yeah.
I'm just gardening 5 square meters of tomatoes. So what I'm doing as the chair of the client interoperability suite for the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance is I've been building test cases to help kind of standardize the EVM, JSON RPC, and so on and so forth. So just taking the current spec and actually building on top of it some actual real test cases. Because believe it or not, there still is not to this day something that I would be able to point and say, this is how we should certify that the client is behaving the right way. It's really complex. There's a lot of different revisions between the different hard forks. So it's difficult to keep up with all the changes there. So that's where I am. I know I'm not the only one doing this type of work. There's been some good work around Oasis to kind of certify JSON RPC, for example. And these are very humble, like grinding kind of engagements where you're not going to be a millionaire doing that, right? But if you don't do this, then there's no way we're going to have an ecosystem in a few years from now. So it's kind of the same thing as the browser wars back in between Netscape and Microsoft, where they're like trying to even just engage and find a way to work together. But I mean, it's clear to me that we're not done. There's a lot more innovation required. There's a lot more people needed to actually standardize on this ecosystem. And then for this ecosystem to become more mature, well, we need to have a little bit of a discussion about the use cases and maybe new business models that could emerge from that, rather than trying to take the existing world and kind of transplant as is, right? So there was a interesting to create a parallel, right? Vitalik once said, I was trying to make Ethereum more like the good stock market. And what we're realizing is that the stock market is turning into crypto. Like it's trying to mimifying itself, like with, GameStop, for example, right?
Yeah.
So we're seeing an interesting path where crypto is trying to build and trying to be like, okay, but we're legit. You can come over to the corporate world. And the corporate world is like, no, actually, we're gonna go to this weird state now. We can, throw away the bath water and just go in there. So give you an idea, right? Type of business that I see would come out of this, for example, is I have a website where you can do quadratic voting. It's free. You can use it as much as you like. You can build all sorts of votes. But if you want to actually see who used the website and how it was used and see like all the votes over time, and even have like a proof that it was executing properly, that the code was there, the people were real, that you had proper justification, that the data was presented properly, then you want to be using some sort of a tracing according to that, right? Because there's no trust anymore.
Of course.
You could have a PHP website right now that could do like electronic voting, right? So you could vote for the next president using some WordPress plugin, right? But we wouldn't trust that. And it's starting to get less and less trustable, right? Because it's being attacked by all sorts of trust tensions in the world. And this is, if you listen to any documentary on the internet, eventually 4chan comes out or something like that. Like it's where all the trust factors come out, right? And people were going to try their infrastructure, play with it. And it's happening at the people level, business level, tech level, all those things. So more and more, we're going to need to have a way to check and really trust the stuff that we're seeing, right? Is this email really from that person? Am I really on the right website? 2 weeks ago, right, we got DNS attacks, right? From like a bunch of providers just went poof. Okay, so it's just namecheap.com got played, right? So that's just one of those attacks where it's really difficult to get back from. And I don't even know for sure, right? I just read that on Twitter. So maybe Twitter is being manipulated, right? So there's just this lack of trust now that the world is global. And so I think having a way to always come back and being able to establish a root of truth from good crypto primitives is going to participate in building a better world going forward.
Okay, so the idea would be probably for the advice to the blockchain industry would be to keep its soul instead of trying to be more like the centralized industry, because that would be that would be losing what made it interesting and unique in the first place.
Yeah, you're on the money. So, exactly on that quadratic voting thing, I'm actually building this right now where I want to build a website where people can use it for free. And if you actually would like to get the data of the feed real time of what's going on with your vote, then you would actually pay me with a bunch of tokens, and I would deliver that to you using the encrypted, like signed by my Ethereum address, right? Give that to you so you will be able to check that it's actually the real data, that you're getting the right data real time, and all that. And so we have it's just an interesting piece for me is that it's not just blockchain. Cloud is also having those issues. So in the cloud world, the ways they're trying to solve it is by using new technology called observability with open telemetry. So real-time data of metrics, real-time data of traces. So now you can actually trace the execution of your code between your service, talking to the database, going back to the other service, going back to that third-party provider, going back to you, sending back this. And this is a trend like worldwide. We're going to start seeing this as pretty much a fact of life, where all the data, all the software execution is going to have to be traced, because you won't be able to trust it otherwise. And so I don't know enough, but zero knowledge execution might come in play as part of that, meaning you won't be able to see really what the execution looks like, but you'll be given a proof where you can check whether the execution was actually performed the right way. And you could check the attributes of the execution, that it's been done the right time, all those things. So
whole scale, like full scale formal verification of every possible outcome. That's something we love doing at Moon, because we're really into formal verification at the moment. And
nice.
Well, because so many blockchains were hacked, and not necessarily hacked because they were poorly coded, but because they were poorly imagined, poorly designed from a game theory perspective. Which brings me to a very cultural question that I will probably ask to every invitee here. Throughout the whole story of the blockchain industry, I assume you have heard about many hacks, about many stupid flaws just like in the field of computer science, but in the blockchain industry. And some of these horrible flaws made our users, our clients, lose a lot of money, quite a lot of it, and quite a lot of trust from their own customers. So is there one that that really had an impact on you, that made you think, oh God, this shouldn't happen, this is why I worked in that field to avoid that? Like, is there one historically that really touched you more than the others?
I'll tell you one where I actually got involved, and it's not glorious, it's not tragic, it's not like there's no millions of dollars lost, and it's actually being disclosed, it's been fixed for years, so it's good to talk about. When the Teku ETH2 client came out, they built their own discovery mechanism based on Discovery v5. I kind of missed the boat on helping them out on that, but okay, it's happened. And they built it on top of a library called Neti. And I found out that you could actually send them, so when you send packets to those, you have to send bytes that kind of help you, tell you which type of message it is and all that. So I sent that a malformed packet to it, and it would actually shut down Discovery, because there were no exception handler around the Discovery system. So the whole thing just like boom, and the client was still active. So your client is still running, but it's no longer discovering peers. So it's extremely vulnerable, right?
Yeah.
So I got a bounty from the Ethereum Foundation for that. So if you guys want to make easy money, go find out like all the flaws in ETH2. By all means, they actually upped the bounty to $100,000 now. So go make some money. That's a legit good way to go and make money that does not get you into weird discussions later. So I got back then like 5,000 or something. It was great to be able to help more than anything else, and to feel like, okay, yeah, what I did actually mattered. yeah, there's more. There's more there. There's always some thresholds or some discussions around the best way to send data between those two clients. For example, right now it's using gossip, so it's you could attack it if it's gossip. There's always ways for you to play nasty tricks on the nodes or things like that. So that's but they've been working diligently toward that. They have peer reputations in a network now, so it's better than before. So DeFi hacks, the thing that really get me going is all the guys who just click random links in Discord and get their apes taken away from them.
Yeah. Okay.
So with Splunk, we can actually do that. We can actually tell you, hey, before you even transact, like this address is bad. Don't talk to them, right? So that really gets me going because I'm like, we've done a number of postmortems where we're like, oh, okay, so this hack happened. Let's see exactly what happened. And you open up in Splunk, you can see the address, you can see everybody like spending money into it, and then there's a big fat tornado cash transaction, right? And then oof, they're gone. So yeah, that's definitely been happening a lot.
The most ironic thing is that many good developers usually also get scammed this way because they have that weird tendency to think that because their code is mathematically pure and bulletproof and absolutely classy, there shouldn't be a problem regarding their code. And this is always where you're not really waiting for the blow, that the blow is coming to knock you out. And many people don't realize that their computation system is maybe it's absolutely flawless, but maybe there will be one trainee who's perhaps a bit too sensitive to appearances, and if you offer that person a trapped binded USB drive with a fancy logo, the person will just say, "Oh, okay, company gift," and try that, and that's how you infiltrate companies. And social engineering is really something the blockchain industry is as vulnerable to as the mainstream industry.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's funny.
Yeah, a colleague of mine told me that if you were to drop USB drives in parking lots around tech companies, about 70% of the time someone would put it into a computer to find out what's on it.
Oh gosh, I would have said I wouldn't have been surprised if it had been 20, but oh
70.
my god.
Yeah. That's why they glue the USB ports on some computers.
yeah, I get that. I totally get why. I know there was a guy who did that a lot by just sending, fancy computer keyboards, and that was it. And it was very very simple. And but I'm amazed by what you're telling me. Like I didn't know that 70% number, and I find it a bit distressing, honestly.
Yeah, sorry. So we at Splunk we do a lot of security work, and that's we actually have like a whole podcast and blog on this type of things. And so yeah, we end up doing a lot of remediation apparently for customers that have those type of issues. So it's a known fact of life for us, and I'm not exposed to it too much, but it seems like it's taking quite a bit of our time to be in touch with our customers on that and helping them out.
Yeah, obviously.
Yep.
Well, that's a very good lesson for our listeners. Even if the blockchain tech is absolutely safer than the centralized one in the long run, there will still be human flaws, and people will still be vulnerable, and common sense is still important, whatever the tech. Any last word to add to this very nice interview, Antoine?
Well, first off, thank you so much for having me. It was great. You gave me an idea. I think I want to do the URL shortener where you sign the URL you want to link to with your Ethereum identity. That might be a good way to ward off some attempts for people to use your stuff. So you could actually check, hey, is this been signed by Antoine or not? And that might be a good way to do some social checks on. Again, to me, the whole theme is there's less and less trust. So you should never trust anything unless it's been signed or encrypted. You can actually get the signature and check that it's real.
So the challenge of the industry would be to make
Mhm.
the tech that allows more trust grow faster than the tech
Yeah,
that makes that decreases the amount of trust.
exactly. I think we went global, and now we're all in one big pool of people, and there's no reason whatsoever to assume good intent anymore. It's just too many people in here. So it's
Thank you
over
so
now.
much. Thank you so much for everything, Antoine. I wish you a very nice day and thanks for being here. That's absolutely fascinating.
Have a great night. Take care.
Bye bye.